I now get to meet another new friend, Rabbi Jenna Stein Turow. And although I did not attend Michigan State University, my brother was a Spartan, so I was up at Michigan State when I was a younger person. But Rabbi Stein Turow is, you can correct me, but the relatively new rabbi at Hillel at Michigan State University for about the last year or so. And we're really excited to have her join us with some teaching, maybe moving from something sublime to something a little bit more poppy this evening as we start learning what the Torah of pop music can teach us. So it's really my great pleasure to introduce us to Rabbi Jenna Stein Turow, who will be teaching with us for the next half hour. So thank you to Rabbi Wexler and to Alana, and welcome Jenna.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I guess it is both a good evening and a good morning, depending on where you're joining us from right now. So for me, I'll say good morning and Chag Sameach. Yes, it's nice to be here. I thought it would be fun at this very early hour, for me at least, to do some fun learning, take a slight turn in between our two, because there's both powerful music before and after me, I believe. So it's kind of nice to take a jaunt into something else. And if it were not Chag, I would be playing music on Spotify to accompany my learning. So don't worry, I won't be singing pop music for you this evening, but you can imagine. So I also want to apologize for those tuning in that I don't have a source sheet for you. And the reason for that is a lot of things. One is that I just couldn't decide what I was going to teach, and I couldn't pick. So I have a lot of different things I'm going to jump around to. But also because I thought it would be nice, in person. I really am missing that face-to-face interaction with people. And so I thought it would be nice for you to see my face, because who doesn't like to see a friendly face? So let's jump in. So what are we talking about? We're talking about pop music, pop culture, and I do mean the genre of pop, but also just general contemporary music in conversation with Torah, but also the Jewish literary canon writ large. And what is my approach? What am I aiming to get at here? I think there's two entry points into this, and it depends on where you're coming from originally. So as a rabbi, as a student of Torah and Jewish literature, I often am approaching it text first. So I'm looking at Jewish texts and I'm learning it either in the original or with translation. And then I think about the next step of that is, what does this mean to me? What does this mean for my community? And then often I pull in pop culture references because I'm thinking about how to make it meaningful and relevant to life today. And often I find that the way to connect it is to do that textual connection to some other text. The other way to do that is to come at it from the complete opposite direction, to say, I'm a person of the world, I study the world, and I know this music, and I know what I care about, and I see Torah in that, and I want to connect it to the Torah that I've learned and say, I have these values and these things I care about in my life. Where can I see them housed in Judaism? And sometimes it's conversation. Sometimes it goes back and forth between the two sources. So we're looking at it from both angles this morning. I have a few different examples I want to present. I just want to present this as a way of looking at the world and of looking at Torah, both the capital T Torah of the text itself and also the lowercase t Torah, as it were, of the Torah of the world. The word Torah means learning. And when we think about, arriving at Sinai as the dawn is approaching and receiving the Torah, I want us to think about all the ways we can be receptive to all the different Torah in our lives. So first, we have to define two important things. The first, which comes up in the first example, is this idea of intersectionality. So this is a working definition, I think. Big word like this always have room for many additions, but intersectionality is the complex, cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, classism, can combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups. Why is this important? Why am I bringing this up? There's three parts to the definition. It's a complex, cumulative way that effects come together. So it's like the synthesis of textual analysis we have. It's the way that discrimination in multiple forms can combine and overlap in different groups. And it's the way that that discrimination affects marginalized groups. So it's interesting because in some ways the Jewish people are considered a marginalized group, and in other ways they're not. I think it depends on what other identities you're holding, and where you live. To be quite honest, how much you feel that as a person who is Jewish. But there are lots of different identities that Jewish people hold, and there are lots of different identities in the world that are marginalized that we can relate to. So that's the first one of the motivating factors I find connect text in Judaism to text in the world. The second is this piece which I learned before I became a rabbi when I was teaching high school English, intertextuality, which is the complex interrelationship between a text and other texts taken as basic to the creation or interpretation of the text. So we do this when we read the Torah and then we look at a commentary, especially Rashi. We know that his commentaries are often looked at not even in conversation with text, but as the way we understand it. So a lot of the stories that we know from the Torah and even from the Talmud, we only understand them because of the way we've added commentary into the conversation, and that commentary has become part of the story itself. And this is very true if you're a scholar of the Torah, especially of these narrative stories. There's lots of extra pieces of stories that we don't even realize after you've learned them that they're not actually in the Torah at all, and they're only midrash. They're only some additional piece, something someone added as a commentary. So my proposal is that we could do this intertextually and intersectionally by taking these pop cultural references and saying they are in direct conversation with these texts in a way that cannot be extricated, and that in a way that is deeply connecting, especially as we know, I work with college students and I worked with lots of young people in my age bracket and younger throughout the years. And I find that this is a really natural, accessible way to get into text for them. So first I want to bring a specific example that I love for so many reasons. It's layered upon layered, and if this were an in-person class, we'd never have time to get to the next text after this one. But the first is this very popular, I promised the title is Pop Pirkei Avot, so I had to start with something from Pirkei Avot. So something from the sages, the sayings of the sages of our fathers. This is one of the most popular, one of the most well-known, one of the most quoted, which is so it's 1:14. It's he, Rabbi Hillel, used to say, "If I am not for me, who will be for me? And when I am for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, when?" It's these three statements, questions that's being asked. If I am not for me, who will be for me? When I am for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, then when? They're fairly self-explanatory, but also confusing at the same time. So how can we understand what these questions are about? And in our minds today, if you're someone who's studied these passages, or even if you haven't, you may have heard these words, we know they're so connected deeply to social activism, to social justice in some way or another. And it's about standing up for yourself, but also standing up for others, and to say that I must stand up for myself and I must stand up for anyone who might be marginalized as well. So this text on its own is almost like the Pirkei Avot definition of intersectionality. What's really beautiful is that it is used that way as well in pop culture, in ways that I think people would be so surprised to hear. So one of my favorite songs is the song called Lemon. It is it's by three people, by NERD, Pharrell Williams, and Rihanna. Mostly featured is Pharrell and Rihanna. And it's a hip hop rap song. If we were in person, it was not Hug. I love to play songs in juxtaposition to Pirkei Avot and hear that, how it sounds so different. But I'm going to just read you an excerpt from the song. This is Pharrell rapping on the song. And just to give you some background also, it's important if we're going to give background for where our Jewish text comes. So this song is a collaboration between a few people. And the basic message of the song is that, you know, I'm not going to care what other people think about me. I've made my money and I know what I stand for and I know what I care about in the world. And you can say what you want, but I'm going to do what I want to do. And it's kind of so it's fun and playful, but also it gets political. So this is what he says in his first verse. Every line is preceded by someone shouting the word hate, which is interesting. So it's hate and then the line. I'm just going to read the lines, but you can imagine that the word hate gets shouted at the beginning of each one. You keep asking me where I'm from, about the borders, and did I run? Keep asking how I feel about guns. There's a light and dark army. Which side do you choose? If not now, then when? And if not me, then who? Don't drink the Kool-Aid, my friends. I tried to tell y'all about this dude. So there are a lot of different ways we could take what this means. If we know when it was written as 2017, 2018 was about when this song was out and playing and popular. So you can take those words and interpret whoever he might be referencing in the song. I will not pose any specific references myself, but you can imagine who he might be talking about and what is the light and dark army he's talking about. But what's just beautiful is that he's directly quoting word for word, if not now, then when, and if not me, then who. It's the reverse order, but it's the two of those questions from Shavuot, directly quoted. And if you look it up on Genius, the lyrics, it doesn't say it's where it's quoted from. Unfortunately, maybe I'll add that annotation myself. But and we can see that it's a very politically charged passage, and it relates to the overall theme of the song, which is that I'm going to show up for myself because I know where I come from and what I've done to get here, but also I'm going to choose to show up for others in a way that aligns with my values, which is very much what we're learning from Pirkei Avot and what we can take away from this song. So depending on where your access point is, you might have heard one and then the other. And I would say most people have heard the Pirkei Avot and have not heard the song. But if you're interested in that kind of music, it's definitely a jam. I encourage you to go listen to it. So that's the first example. And I think it just beautifully encapsulates this message because it's both on the surface very clear how they connect because they're quoting each other, but also you could delve deep into both and say, what are they really trying to get at here and how are these in conversation with each other? One other example is also from the movie Black Klansman, which if you haven't seen it, don't know it. It's about this Black police officer who poses as an activist so that he can help the police department in some kind of muddled way of both keeping Black people safe and oppressed at the same time, essentially. He infiltrates the KKK as part of the movie, and that's why it's called Black Klansman. But towards the beginning of the movie, he's at a rally, and it's a fictitious character who's giving some kind of rallying speech to a group of Black people in America, and in his speech, he directly quotes this entire passage from Pirkei Avot in the context of also kind of preaching, and then it goes into this like power charge of the people. They all have their fists in the air, and they're all supercharged by his speech and very roused by it. And so it's this other powerful example of how this text has been taken both in a religious and a non-religious context by other marginalized groups to say we have to stand up for ourselves and for each other. It's really beautiful. I'm going to pivot slightly to a nice message. Who doesn't like a nice message? That isn't a nice message, but something just uplifting in and of itself. So that's a specific Pirkei Avot example. Now I want to move into the Torah. We talk a lot about a lot of different values we're supposed to learn, but we all know that there's one basic one, the golden rule we can boil down to, which also if you study Torah, you can tell exactly where it's from. It's from Leviticus, Vayikra, chapter 19, verses 17 and 18. Really, verse 18 is the one I'm talking about. It's where the second half of the verse is, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself, or and you shall love your neighbor as yourself, or you will love, you do love those near you as if they were you. There's a lot of different ways you could translate it. They all end up meaning essentially the same thing, which we now say treat others as you want to be treated. There's another really beautiful, fairly recent interpretation, I think, of this verse, not directly, but I think it's a really cool contemporary phrase we can take. And I'm actually wearing it specifically. I thought I would model the text for you. So this is as treat people with kindness. And this is Harry Styles merchandise that I'm wearing right now, because wouldn't be a Tikkun Leil Shavuot in 2021 if we didn't bring up Harry Styles. But also because his song "Treat People with Kindness" is this. This is a lot of people buy this merchandise now, and it's specifically from one song he has, which I'm going to read some of the lyrics in a minute. But the really beautiful piece is the story of how the song got made. So we know that this verse in Vayikra in Leviticus is from this long list of laws that we're getting. And one of those laws is that we should love our fellow as ourselves, that we should treat others as if they were us, and so we should love them the way that we want to be loved. And Harry Styles is this, global pop star musician, and he had a pin or a sticker. I don't remember the exact item, but it had something that said treat people with kindness that he was wearing when he was on tour. And his fans took it and ran with it, and they loved that message so much they kind of turned it into one of his messages. And he was so inspired by that he wrote the song Treat People with Kindness in honor of the fact that his fandom was taking that message from him. And it really, I think, kicked off the year 2021 because he released the music video for the song fairly at the beginning of this year. And it's just a nice message. The chorus is, maybe we can find a place to feel good and we can treat people with kindness. Find a place to feel good. And each of the verses is just about having good feelings and kind of giving into those good feelings when you have them, and knowing that that's what will last, that if we're here long enough, we'll see that it's all for us. He says that in the song as well. And that to me is a renowned, familiar soundbite of this mantra that people know today, just the way that people used to on the street, perhaps, and shtetls in Eastern Europe would quote the Torah at each other. Now we can quote musicians at each other. And so in this way, I think it's a really beautiful example of approaching it from one way or the other. For me, I was reading Vayikra one day and I thought, oh, I love this song by Harry Styles. And I somehow immediately connected as that's a quick way to explain the message. And when I teach my students, I know that they love Harry Styles. And I say, you all know the song? And they say, yes. And I say, well, here's a piece of Torah that says the same thing. So now you know, even though Harry Styles isn't Jewish, his music is filled with Jewish values. And that's a really beautiful message that I think we can take, that I can look at the music I'm listening to on the radio or on my Spotify, whatever apps you're using to stream your music, and I can say that I know there's Torah in there and it's not that hard to find. The last piece, so this is why I didn't put together a source sheet, because I have like a million more examples I could give you, but I also only have so much time in which to give them. So I'm just going to give one more example because I think we have to bring female voices into the room. And this is another reason why I love bringing in music, because it's a really easy way to make sure there are female voices on your source sheet and your talk, because we don't have that many historic female sources, but we do have a lot of women in music. And so it's a quick way to get that women on your sheet. So I did an exercise with some students this year, and this would be also in another future workshop of learning I would do. I would say, everybody bring a song that you love, that you know what the words are, you know what it means, or you know what it means to you, and let's look at it and see what we see in it that might be Jewish or could connect to Jewish values or text, and see if we can forge some kind of connection there. If we can take something we already love in culture and put it in conversation with our Jewish values. And I had a really fun time doing this, as did the students. Some highlight examples, which I'm not going to share the whole conversation for, but the song 34 plus 35 by Ariana Grande was a great example that somebody gave. And if you don't know, that song is, that song is about math. No, it's about spending time with your partner, private time with your partner. And so obviously college students thought it'd be hilarious for a rabbi to talk about the song, but they didn't know I love Ariana Grande and I knew the song too. But I'm going to go to another example. As I said, I promised I'd bring another superstar. So of course somebody brought Taylor Swift lyrics to us. And I thought this was really timely tonight because it's also the end of the Omer. You'll see what I mean in a minute. There are many Taylor Swift songs you bring. Actually, like many pop musicians, references religiosity as part of her music. They all talk about, losing themselves in love, and that becomes their new religion. And she talks a lot about that in a lot of her songs. But this song, particular someone brought, was the song Red. So this is the title track off of her album Red. It came out in 2012. You might not know the song Red, but you do know the song. What are the famous songs from that? 22 is on that album, and I Knew You Were Trouble. That's one of the other famous ones, and We Are Never Getting Back Together. So those are like the songs everybody knows from that album. Whether you're a fan of Taylor Swift, you can't say you've never heard those songs before. Red is this song where she's talking about a breakup. Basically, all the hard emotions you go through after a breakup with someone. And she does it talking about it in colors as metaphor. She says, losing him was blue, like I'd never known. Missing him was dark gray all alone. Forgetting him was like trying to know someone you never met. But loving him was red. And in later album, she references this too. It's just, this is not brought up in the source, but she talks now about, now that she's in love with the new person she's dating, she says, I used to think love was burning red. Now I know it's golden. So she also clearly changes colors based on the person. But when I brought this, when the student brought this to me, I said, okay, so what about this is speaking to us in Judaism? What are we seeing there? And everyone was kind of stuck. We were at a loss to see how this could be Jewish. And I don't think that was a purpose. It wasn't like a stump the rabbi moment. I think there was a real curiosity there. And for me, I love Taylor Swift, but I also love Jewish texts. And I had never thought about this song in that context before. And I immediately thought of Kabbalah and the Sefirot. And I'll explain that in a second. Because the Sefirot, these are the 10 layers, elements, realms of God's existence, both in this plane and in other planes. And one of the goals of Kabbalah is to try and reach those different levels, try to understand them. And it's also one of the ways that we count the Omer leading up to Shavuot, is that each week we have a different Sefirah that we're meant to focus on, and the way it's in relationship with the other Sefirot. Now, what does this have to do with Taylor Swift and this song? Every Sefirah also is represented by a color. So each one of the ones, Chesed, Din, they're all a specific color. Now, the specific colors are also often up for debate. So I have a specific suggestion as to which one is which, but you can look up different maps of the Sefirot and they'll tell you that each one is a color. And so I thought, what a great way to compare it to the song and say that each of these colors that she's mentioning is also tied specifically to an emotion, but also an experience along with that emotion, which is also what we're talking about with the Sefirot. Each Sefirah, each of these elements or realms of God is connected to an element of how we are as people, both a value that we hold and a message we carry in a way that we want to walk in the world, a way we want to experience and connect to ourselves and to other people. And so I don't think there's a direct correlation between what her blue and her red are on the map, but it's just a way to say that everyone is looking for different simple metaphors to explain big concepts in our life. And two of the beautiful ways I have seen this done are in these ancient, important Jewish texts and in the iconic pop music of today's world. And I think there's a lot to be learned from both of those. And I used to be shy about loving pop music. I love a lot of different genres of music. I listen to music all day. I live alone with my cat, so I listen to music constantly. Except for when it's Chag and then I have to sing to myself. And so I think it's a really important thing to say. It's pop for a reason. It's called pop. It's short for popular, and there is a reason why it's popular. It's catchy. It gets stuck in your head, but also because it's both a really simple, easy thing to latch onto. And often, if you're lucky, especially these days, there's some underlying message that can be really powerful and useful for us as human beings. And I think there are even more examples I could give of this specifically, but I'm just going to throw out one last very quick one in my last few minutes here, which is that, we love to talk about creation and the story of humans being created, especially on Shavuot. I find that even though we're going back to receiving the Torah, people love to turn and say, what can we be revealed about the way that humans were formed? I think it's about saying, what can we learn about ourselves this year to move forward? And so you have to go back to the beginning to say what you can learn. So if we think about being made in God's image, we know now after years of extrapolation, and even if you look to Rashi, really, it says that being made in God's image means being made like God with powers of comprehension and discernment, but also with the characteristics of God, right? It's about an internal existence. It's the way that our souls operate within us. That's what makes us in God's image. That can be a really difficult concept to wrap your head around, even if you've learned it time and time again. And I find that there are some powerful women of pop and hip hop, really, that speak to this. So the first one is Lizzo, who is an icon for many reasons, but also because she's championed body positivity in a way that other people have not embraced as much. And she has many songs that speak to this, but I thought specifically of her song Juice, which is, if I'm shining, everybody gonna shine. I was born like this, don't even gotta try. And so that's like leading up to the chorus. And so that's both this message of, we're in it together, but also it's about, if I'm shining, that means you'll shine, right? If I let the God out of me, then it will be reflected in you, and we'll both have access to the God that's inside of us if we tap into ourselves. And also to say, I was born like this, that this is a part of me inherently from the beginning of who I am. And that, of course, for me, immediately made me think of what have we heard? Born This Way. It's a Lady Gaga song. The whole song is all about this. I'm beautiful in my way. God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track. Baby, I was born this way. So we're humans. We make bad decisions. We make mistakes. We're at fault a lot of the time. As it's just a nature of being human. But the other part of human nature is that we were made in this image to say that there's nothing inherently wrong with us as people, as humans, and that nothing about who I am is a mistake or is wrong. And I should choose to channel that energy when I walk in the world and when I go about making decisions and feeling empowered and feeling inspired. I know that I have that in me. And some days for me as a rabbi, I find that inspiration comes from I'm praying in the morning and I tap into the prayers. I hit that kavanah and I feel connected. Some days I'm studying a text and I really get into the meat of it with the people I'm learning with or teaching, and I find the connections there deep in the history and the Gemara and the Torah. And some days I find I'm having a rough day and I blast a playlist on my Spotify and I go for a walk around my neighborhood and I can take in the nature and appreciate, all that's been created in the world that's a part of God. And I can listen to that music on my Bluetooth headphones and think about the amazing technology, the little computer in my pocket, and be inspired just by the music and just let go and say, Lizzo is going to be my Torah for today. And there are many days where I feel like that's the case. So I think to reiterate, this is talking about the intertextuality of pop music, of pop culture, and Jewish text, and to say you can find your inspiration in Jewish text and then see how it's reflected in the culture, or you can feel connected to culture and then seek out how that also is founded in your Jewish text. And it goes both ways, and depending on what you need from the day and what you need from yourself and what you find yourself inspired by, you can enter it from any point, and at some point they will intersect. So thank you all very much for learning with me. Everyone who stuck with me, I wish I could see all of your faces. I hope you stick around. I'm excited for the things that are coming after me, I have to say. So it might be a long night over here. And I'll say Chag Sameach.
Thank you. I just want to express a little bit of gratitude to you, to Rabbi Jenna Stein Turow, who's joining us again, I guess, from East Lansing, Michigan, and Michigan State University, and bringing us this really interesting way of thinking about popular music as both intertextual and intersectional. You mentioned at the end of your teaching this connection back to the book of Genesis. We had a couple of USYers on just before who were talking about that very story and expressing concern about what their life would be like when they attended college. I think if people attending college find rabbis welcoming them like you with these great ideas and forms of outreach, they'll find themselves warmly welcomed. So I'm really grateful for your time this evening, and I want to wish you a Chag Sameach. I get to turn the program over to some colleagues now in Southern California who'll be leading us in music and song. So I'll be welcoming Rabbis Adam Kligfeld, Rebecca Schatz-Cantor, Michelle Stone, and Rabbi Cantor Hillel Shorny, all joining us from Los Angeles this evening. And I just want to express my own gratitude to Rabbi Alana Garber for her hard work organizing this evening, and the people at Flow helping us with technology. And I get to wish you all a Chag Sameach and good Yantif. So take good care, everybody.